Hawaii. To Americans, an enchanting island territory 2,000 miles from the mainland. To the Japanese, Pearl Harbor, an enemy bastion. For 2 years, Europe has been at war, but in Honolulu, people talk of pineapples, sugarcane, money, and tourists. The year is 1941. There is still time for one more aloha, still time to enjoy tropical skies and sweet music, flowered leis, and the hula. On another Pacific island, beyond the international dateline, events which will change the course of history are maturing with reckless rapidity. Japan's divine mission to bring the 8 corners of the world under one roof, the sacred code of the warrior, the glory of conquest. But behind bright banners and arrogant words, the Japanese High Command ponders a dilemma. To realize the dreams of conquest, the war machine must have the oil of Southeast Asia. Japan has none. With the European powers locked in a war of survival, America's Pacific Fleet is the major obstacle to Japanese domination of Asia and the Pacific. The ruling militarists hatch a fateful plan to eliminate the obstacle: sink the United States Navy. Guns are sighted on Pearl Harbor, the key to America's defense in the Pacific, the headquarters of the United States Pacific Fleet. Japan knows the attack she is planning means war, but if she sinks the principal striking force of the United States Navy, the prize is worth the risk. Such bold designs demand hard study and exact intelligence. The Hawaiian Islands are scrutinized, especially Oahu, with its principal targets: Honolulu, Pearl Harbor, the major airfields, installations of every kind, ports, naval bases, warehouses, dry docks. Every military factor of importance is pinpointed for the coming attack. But the heart of the assault will center on Ford Island in the middle of Pearl Harbor, around which the American fleet is moored. Intelligence reports main enemy force here, destroyers here, cruisers, converted target ship Utah, seaplane tender. There is little the Japanese do not know in advance. The Navy's finest pilots are picked to deliver the assault, which will be carried out entirely by carrier-based aircraft. Technically and emotionally, their indoctrination is as perfect as human ingenuity can make it. By late October 1941, dress rehearsals for the attack are secretly staged over terrain chosen for its resemblance to Pearl Harbor. Air crews hold repeated, highly realistic maneuvers, perfecting their teamwork, practicing approaches, sharpening their marksmanship. Plans and decisions become orders and actions. Events move with relentless precision toward their climax. In early November, Admiral Yamamoto, designer of the Pearl Harbor attack, orders his striking force to advance into Hawaiian waters, and upon the very opening of hostilities, attack the main force of the United States fleet. On November 16, the ships singly and in small groups slip out to sea to rendezvous in a hidden harbor in the remote Koryo Islands, far north of Tokyo. A week later, the Pearl Harbor striking force is assembled and weighs anchor for Hawaii. 4,000 miles and 12 days away. The task force maintains radio silence and travels a roundabout course off normal shipping lanes. Dirty weather and heavy seas help veil its progress. There has never before been so powerful a striking force in the Pacific. 2 vast battleships, 6 of Japan's newest and finest carriers, a screen of 8 destroyers, 3 cruisers and 3 submarines. Aboard the carriers are 40 torpedo bombers, 135 dive bombers, 104 horizontal bombers, and 81 strafing planes. A total of 360 aircraft. Preparing themselves for the attack, pilots pause at Shinto shrines to renew their dedication to the spirits of their ancestors. On every flight deck, pilots receive last-minute intelligence on Pearl Harbor. They prepare to strike for the glory of Japan. Admiral Nagumo, commander of the task force, delivers a final message from Imperial headquarters in Tokyo. Climb Mount Niyataka. The code to attack. The fresh northwesterly trade is blowing, and the helmsmen swing their carriers into the wind to launch the planes. Latitude, 26 degrees north. Longitude, 158 degrees west. The launching point. Pearl Harbor lies 275 miles to the south. It is 0600. It is X-Day. Five 5,000 miles away in Washington, it is almost noon. At the Navy Department, intelligence experts have had a puzzling Sunday morning. Some time ago, they broke Japan's most carefully guarded code. They've deciphered a dispatch from Tokyo to the Japanese embassy. Secret instructions reject America's request for mediation in the Far Eastern crisis. Order negotiations broken off. Exactly what this means, no one knows. The State Department is uneasy. Secretary Cordell Hull awaits another crucial conference with the Japanese ambassador and a special envoy from Tokyo scheduled for 1 o'clock. The Japanese ask for a 45-minute postponement, but there is no delay in the flight of their warplanes toward Hawaii. Oahu, sunny, relaxed, peaceful. Flying weather good, visibility clear. Slowly life begins to stir on the island. At an Army radar station, a private practices as he waits for the breakfast truck. He picks up planes approaching from the north and tracks them for a few minutes before reporting to Air Force Headquarters, Hickam Field. But the planes are thought to be American. Ten minutes to 8. December 7, 1941. The pilots and the planes depart. Never in modern history has a war begun with so smashing a victory. In 1 hour and 50 minutes, the Japanese have sunk or shattered 8 battleships: Oklahoma, West Virginia, Arizona, Nevada, California, Tennessee, Maryland, Pennsylvania. 3 cruisers and 3 destroyers and 4 smaller ships are sunk or battered. "188 planes and most of their hangars demolished." The Japanese have lost 29 planes. 68 of their pilots and sailors are dead, and 5 midget submarines which tried to penetrate Pearl Harbor are beached or sunk. One of the cheapest military triumphs on record. Suffering, agony, death. 1,178 men wounded. 68 civilians dead. 109 Marines dead. 218 soldiers dead. 2,008 sailors dead. The head of their government, War Minister and Dictator Tojo, accepts a conqueror's log and rejoices with his subjects. Pearl Harbor looks as though the Japanese propagandists are right. So it seems in the aftermath. But while the hulks are still hot from the attack, experts and technicians are being flown in from the mainland. The most extraordinary salvage job in history begins. Hidden in the havoc wrought by the new enemy are the seeds of a miracle. In the ruins, there is life. With the dead lies the vision of a shattered fleet, hidden in a pall of fire and smoke, and the vengeance of the United States. Dead ships sail again, the fleet has arisen from Pearl Harbor. Comes the Battle of the Coral Sea. American carrier planes pounce on a Japanese invasion force out to engulf Fort Moresby and cut off Australia. For the first time in history, men of war fight it out without once sighting each other. When the battle is over, the Japanese retreat. One of their carriers has been sunk. 2 others are badly damaged. The United States loses the carrier Lexington. But the tide is turning. Out from America across the enormous ocean waste, transports stream toward Australia with supplies and men. The buildup begins. Personalities who will dominate the coming struggle emerge. General MacArthur in Australia. And in Pearl Harbor, Admiral Nimitz. As the Japanese prepare to strike again, Nimitz makes a fateful decision. He gathers west of Pearl Harbor, 3,500 miles east of Tokyo. Midway itself sends incessant patrols in search of the elusive Japanese. Massive forces are converging on this pinpoint in the ocean, which the enemy wants as its eastern outpost. For America, it is the last century between Japan and Hawaii. The Pacific War is focused on a coral atoll, 6 miles in diameter. Day after day, hour after hour, planes search, and search. And then, through a gap in the clouds, Japanese troop transports. But what the spotting plane does not see is the Japanese striking force, which outnumbers the American. Midway blazes, but Midway stands. Far at sea, Admiral Spruance increases speed to 25 knots and prepares to close on the Japanese. Admiral Fletcher, officer and tactical command, orders, proceed southwesterly and attack enemy carriers when definitely located. The tireless search planes hit the jackpot. The enemy carriers are finally located. Midway has been badly hit, but Midway comes back fighting. So loaded with fighting equipment is this stationary aircraft carrier, little room is left for its navy, the Goonie Bird. Midway hits the Japanese with all it has. Every available land-based plane is sent against the enemy fleet. Miss after miss, no one hit. The Japanese come through the attack unchecked. The invasion of Midway is still on. 5,000 troops stand by for landing orders. But Spruant's task force is closing in. The Admiral now knows the approximate location of the enemy carriers. It is June 4th, 1942. A moment for a command decision. Pilots are summoned to the ready room and briefed. Crewmen are called to stations. Spruant has cast the die. The task force will risk an all-out attack against superior odds, hoping to surprise the enemy, hoping to annihilate the enemy. Pilots, man your planes! In all three American carriers, in Hornet, in Enterprise, in Yorktown, the young and the brave prepare for battle. Some will fall in flames from the sky they seek to dominate. Some will perish in the ocean, whose mastery they seek to win. But the ritual of launching takes its disciplined course, as precise and ordered as a ballet. The enemy, still unaware of the approaching American fleet, prepares for another strike on Midway Island. Below decks, the pilots are at ease, while their planes, which are armed with torpedoes, in the case the United States Navy is sighted, are rearmed for another bombing mission. Poor intelligence is an enemy blunder, a godsend for Spruance. But all-out attack begins with all-out disaster. Hornet's Torpedo Squadron 8 runs into murderous enemy flak and swarming Zero fighters. The Torpedo 8's 15 planes, all are destroyed, and not one hit is scored. Out of a total of 41 torpedo planes from 3 carriers, only 6 survive. The news is grim, but the attack continues. The dive bombers go in. Enemy defenses, off balance from earlier assaults, are unequal to the new attack. The carriers are hit, and in 2 amazing minutes, the course of the battle is reversed. It is the Americans who inflict the slaughter. The Japanese crumble. Akagi, smashed and sinking. Kaga, smashed and sinking. The American submarine Nautilus jumps into the fight and sights the smoking carrier Soyu. Torpedoes from below are added to the bombs from above. Soyu, smashed and sinking. One Japanese carrier off to the north remains untouched, the Ilyu. A scouting plane finally spots the Americans. The Japanese lash back. Yorktown is the target, and Yorktown knows it. Detection gear picks up the avenging enemy. 30 to 40 planes approaching from west-southwest, 40 miles up. Man your battle stations. Fighters take off to meet the attack. From ship and sky, the Japanese encounter fierce defense, but they press their assault to the limit. Yorktown is hit. She is dying. But retaliation is on the way. Planes from the Enterprise bring down the curtain on the Battle of Midway. The Leo is smashed and sinking. 4 Japanese carriers gone, and with them, their irreplaceable pilots. Yorktown is dead. But so are Japanese plans to dominate the Eastern Pacific. Admiral Struens, his ships and his men have won the Battle of Midway, one of the most decisive victories in naval history. The Imperial Japanese Navy retreats, creating military catastrophe in the history of the United States. Today, Pearl Harbor is the mightiest of bases, sheltering an ever-expanding fleet, ever-increasing assault forces. And only minutes away is Honolulu, a light-hearted haven in the midst of war, an interlude for sailors between battles. assault troops. They come from places like Kansas, Alabama, and Oregon. They are destined for places like Tarawa, Kawagalin, and Anahuac. The names are worlds apart, but global strategy demands they be brought together. Tokyo lies 4,000 miles westward by sea. It cannot be reached unless these men first suffer and bleed and die on the intervening coral atolls that block the way. The victor of the battle at Midway, Admiral Spruance, is named Commander, Central Pacific Forces, by his chief, Admiral Nimitz. Under Spruance, powerful fast carrier forces sail from Pearl Harbor to test the possibilities of sustaining seaborne air power far from base, far from land support. The fleet is out to strike and stay. The fast new Essex-class carriers bring air power where air power is needed, anywhere, anytime. Each of the 27,000-ton ships can be driven through the water at a speed that keeps pace with the fastest units in the fleet. The hours are long from battle to battle, and between their bouts with death, the ship's company and the pilots live and play as best they can. For the 2,500 sailors, the ship is a seagoing city, organized for the routine of day-to-day existence, as well as the requirements of war. But the business of warships is war, and the task force speeds steadily toward the target, into battle. The islands to be seized are part of Micronesia, the tiny islands. Strategy for the coming conquest is explained to the men who must execute the plan. While Marines claw up the Solomon Islands in the South Pacific, while soldiers push northwestward on New Guinea in the Southwest Pacific, the carrier groups smash at enemy defenses in the Central Pacific, compelling him to split his forces, confusing him as to the main line of attack. The hour for action approaches. In the middle of the Pacific, in the middle of nowhere, every sailor in every part of the ship prepares for the coming attack. In the general mess, ship's cooks break out special chow that's stowed away for moments like this, tense, long moments before battle. None says, but all know, some shipmates at ease today will be dead or wounded tomorrow. Dawn and action come all too soon. It is later than they dare think.
General quarters.
But no preparation can purge the landings of their terror. Japanese resistance makes an inferno of every beachhead, a hell of every shoreline. American troops are pushed to the limit of endurance, but they endure. Supply ships keep fighting ships at sea, in combat. Though hundreds of miles from Pearl Harbor, though thousands of miles from California, there is no lack of essential ammunition, food and material, fuel, to keep the enemy on the run, to give those in battle more than they need to fight their fight. Carrier aircraft not only spearhead invasion, but they lend close support to ground troops when and where needed. Other carriers roam far afield to pound down such enemy bastions as Truk, a formidable fleet anchorage in the Central Pacific, an island the Japanese have encrusted with armor, aircraft, pilots, and soldiers in their attempt to dominate Micronesia. Plane after plane, squadron after squadron, group to every ship, fighting Hellcats, dive-bombing Dauntlesses, Avengers armed with torpedoes. Winged warcraft fill the sky. Into combat information centers come the first warnings of counterattack, and all hands know the carriers will be the major targets. Radar data is swiftly translated into symbols and precisely plotted. The meaning of plot and symbol is all too clear, all too simple. Enemy planes approaching. Fighter direction officers order out the carrier's combat air patrol to intercept the attackers, beat them off, shoot them down. Over the crucial burning islands, other carrier planes bomb and strafe in close support of the guy on the ground, who's slugging it out with a rifle, a carbine, or perhaps a hand grenade, a flamethrower, or bayonet. But it works. American soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, as a team, crack and then pulverize the Japanese in their defenses. Island after island falls, and the Japanese never give up until they die. But there are always a few survivors, too stunned to fight off, too broken to resist. Back from the battle come the wounded and maimed. Back to the carriers come the shattered and crippled. the planes and their pilots, the ships and their... Across the restless wilderness of water that is Pacific, in name only, the United States Navy orders Halsey's 3rd Fleet and Kincaid's 7th Fleet to the Philippines, sailing over the Mindanao Reef and into Leyte Gulf. Allied soldiers and... The liberation of the Philippines will start with the island of Leyte. Seize the beaches. Establish a base. 6 simple words on which hangs the destiny of the Western Pacific. $132,000 troops, 200,000 tons of material, 750 transports and landing craft for the GIs. Leyte Gulf is all-out war. For the Japanese, Leyte Gulf is the most tempting target ever offered. And the Japanese know it. They had long been waiting for the Allies to get out on a limb. They had long had a plan to cut off that limb. Down from the north, up from the south, in from the west, the Imperial Japanese Navy converges with 3 powerful forces to perform the surgery at Leyte Gulf. The entire remaining naval strength of Japan is mustered for one final supreme battle. Loss of the Philippines will tear the Japanese Empire in 2. Cutting off the home islands from the oil confesses we are about to fight a battle that will decide the fate of our empire. The mission of our naval forces is truly great. Steady attrition has undermined the once superb Imperial Japanese Navy. What the sailors now lack, they supplant with courage sired out of desperation. The American submarines Darter and Dace are stationed west of the Philippines. 3 days after the Allied landings at Leyte Gulf, they discover part of the converging Japanese Navy. They attack, sink 2 cruisers, and send the enemy's course and speed to Halsey and Kincaid. Darter is lost, but the Americans are alerted. Halsey's flagship. The 3rd Fleet prepares its opening move, and what is to be the greatest naval battle in all of history. Halsey orders out his search planes, orders them to pinpoint the Japanese. East toward San Bernardino Strait. The enemy plans to sail through the strait. The Japanese Navy can count on no help from its pilots and planes, all but destroyed in earlier battles. So anti-aircraft measures have been intensified in the hope the ships by themselves can beat off the Americans. Six flashing attacks concentrate on the 63,000-ton battleship Musashi. Hit after hit is scored. 21 torpedoes find their mark. The giant Musashi becomes the first Japanese battleship sunk entirely by aircraft. Other ships are damaged. The Japanese Central Forces pause and turn back. It has been battered, mauled, wounded, but it has not been destroyed. In the meantime, the Japanese Southern Force in battle array, with all its boilers lighted off, rips into the Mindanao Sea towards Surigao Strait, leading directly to Leyte Gulf in the southeast. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers lunge through the narrow waters, hoping to force the strait open and join up with the Central Force in the twin annihilation of the United States Army and Navy. But the jaws of an American trap are open. Ships and sailors comprise a float. Behind the PT patrol is the destroyer picket line. Behind the destroyers are the cruisers. Behind the cruisers are the battleships. All hands are quiet, tense, waiting. The Japanese hurl themselves headlong through the dark into the trap. Midnight, October 24th, inside the Japanese force. Detection gear picks up their enemy. Suddenly, brilliantly, searchlights dispel the night. The Battle of Surigao Strait is the trap, and the jaws close. Japanese under their guns, the old battleships take their vengeance at Surigao Strait. Japanese rescue. The Japanese Southern Force is destroyed. But there is no time for celebration. To the north, San Bernardino Strait. Unguarded, open waterway leading to the approaches of Leyte Gulf. Through this passage, the Japanese Central Force of battleships, cruisers, destroyers, steams at 20 knots. This is the force that was turned back. But if it could turn once, it could turn again, and turn it has, toward Leyte. Only light American units, small escort carriers, destroyers, guard this approach to Leyte Gulf. The rushing Japanese are first sighted by surprised, horrified search planes from the escort carriers. Should these 22 enemy ships break through, they will turn Leyte landings into bloody Battle of Samar.
General quarters, all hands, man your battle stations. All hands, man your battle stations.
screens of real and chemical smoke between the escort carriers and the enemy, then bore in to deliver a furious torpedo attack. One of the most frantic, desperate actions of war at sea. Every plane that can get off the escort carriers joins the unequal battle. Trained only, the Japanese keep pounding back, this time for good. 5 American ships, Gambier Bay, St. Lo, Johnston, O. Roberts, sunk. 2,800 casualties. Meanwhile, far to the north, off Cape Engano, the 3rd Japanese force is discovered. A force that answers the question the Americans have been asking since the start of the battle for Leyte Gulf. Where are the carriers? The Japanese northern force includes 4 carriers, as well as battleships, cruisers, destroyers, steaming on a southerly course. The carriers are the final threat to Leyte Gulf. But the task of the northern force is suicidal. It is to act as decoys to lure Halsey's 3rd Fleet away from Leyte Gulf, while the central and southern forces drive the Americans out of the Philippines. The radio silence is deliberately broken to betray position. The dummy messages are intercepted by Halsey's radio men. The Admiral is confronted with a tough problem. Should he stay at Leyte or sink the Japanese carriers? Regarding his mission to be offensive rather than defensive, he orders the 3rd Fleet north. Princeton. The Japanese decoy has light carriers, 6 heavy cruisers, 4 light cruisers, 9 destroyers. Fleets are made by nations. Battles are won by men. But when battle is done, the young and brave sleep, heedless of their greatest victory at sea. The most complex, the most compact, the most deadly ship of war, ton for ton, ever conceived by man, the submarine. No training is more rigid, no training more intense than that of the submariner who must fight his battles imprisoned in a carcass of steel, sailing in the deeps of the world's water basins. A grueling exercise in the pressure chamber, difficult practice with the Munson lung for escaping from wrecked submarines. Rigorous tests these sailors must pass to become full-fledged submariners. 50% of the volunteers will fail. New fleet submarines are built for long-range patrols, lasting up to 75 days. Built to cruise 10,000 miles without refueling. When commissioned, they will be named for fish: Tulaby, Tang, Growler, and Gutcheon, Sea Raven, and Skate. On the New England coast, the killer fish are spawned that will eat at the vitals of Japan. Into every submarine bound for battle are 24 torpedoes. Into every torpedo warhead is packed the equivalent of 1,000 pounds of TNT. With bold and skillful torpedo tactics, a single submarine can kill an enemy aircraft carrier, as the Albacore did in the Central Pacific. The perfect torpedo spread will sink the biggest battleship, as Sea Lion II did in the East China Sea. These are targets every skipper dreams of. But there is another, less spectacular, more important target: the Japanese merchant marine. From New England to Hawaii, from Point Judith to Diamond Head, the 8 officers and 75 men in each new submarine learn to live with their boat and with each other, conditioning themselves for the tests and trials that are yet to come. The voyage is long, but with every passing watch, the fledgling submarine becomes a more efficient weapon, a happier boat with a character all her own. Single-handed and alone, the submarine Flasher sank 21 Japanese ships, totaling more than 100,000 tons. How many will this newcomer get? Whatever her score, whatever her fate, there will be no fanfare. Anonymous adventure, ordeal in obscurity will be her lot. The submarine service is the silent service. The Atlantic gives way to the Caribbean to the Panama Canal, connecting the East with the West, and the West with the East. More valuable to the United States than all her gold, the defense of a hemisphere rests on control of this tiny strip of water. Battleships like the Iowa, carriers like the Essex, cruisers like the Baltimore, destroyers like the Fletcher squeeze through the locks. While electric mules haul and real monkeys play, submarines, too, cross the 40-mile Central American isthmus to join those who have gone before, those who have gone to war. Ahead, under the sundown, lies Pearl Harbor. The boat taws, the crew sharpens. Drill and practice, practice and drill, and more practice, and now submerging practice. 60 seconds to make a 300-foot boat racing over the water at 20 knots vanish completely. The best chow in the service is cooked aboard submarines. The galleon mess, small and cramped. But here the men live and talk and gripe and think and relax as best they can. Their morale, very high. Knock it off. Prepare to surface. Pearl Harbor, where peace stops, where war begins. For the new submarines, they arrive at the rate of 4 to 5 a month. Fresh new crews, clean new boats, welcomed by the veterans under the camaraderie of arms, an emotion of men welded together in a common experience for a common purpose. Subpack, commander of Submarines Pacific, Admiral Lockworth. With more than 20 years' experience in submarine warfare, he remembers that underwater boats almost brought England to her knees in World War I. He has seen the havoc wrought by U-boats in the Battle of the Atlantic in World War II. If the Axis can do it, So can the Allies. From his headquarters in Pearl Harbor, the Admiral directs a powerful coordinated force of Allied wolf packs and single submarines. Ranging from the Aleutians to the East Indies, from the Societies to the Kuriles, all over, everywhere, underwater sailors execute the first commandment of United States submarine doctrine. Inflict maximum damage on enemy ships and shipping by the offensive patrol and focal points. In from the submarines at sea pour the results. From Rasher, 100,000 tons sunk. From Bar, 97,000 tons sunk. From Tang, 94,000 tons sunk. From Silversides, 90,000 tons sunk. Gradual but incessant puncturing of the arteries all over, everywhere, through which flows the life of the Japanese Empire. And ordered out from headquarters go more submarines into the war against the Empire of Japan. Clary's Crushers, Roach's Raiders, Blair's Blasters. Preparing for the first patrol, submarine and crew face a grim gamut of missions. All hazardous, all alone, all far from base. They may be ordered to mine enemy coastal waters. They may be ordered to photograph island shorelines for invasion. They may be ordered to rescue downed pilots at sea. They may be ordered to smuggle spies into Japanese territory. They may be ordered on missions from which there is no return. Orders. Many orders will be issued, and all received with the same simple response. Aye, aye, sir. But no matter what the mission, the threat of death at full fathom 5, of death in the depths, hovers over the men in submarines. And yet they put to sea with one thought only: follow the motto of their sister ship, Gutchum. The motto that says find them, chase them, sink them. Japanese shipping is the immediate target of the Allied submarine offensive. The most modern, the most dynamic society in the East is an island society, and the Achilles heel of an island empire, a heartbeat of an industrial nation, is its means of transport over the seas. Destroy that means, destroy the merchant marine, destroy the navy, and the skill and diligence of 27 million Japanese people who support the war. Their work will be valueless. Every shop, every factory, every industry will be idle, bankrupt. The greatest industrial cities of the East: Tokyo, Yokohama, Nagasaki, Kobe. Japan's foundries, steel mills, heavy industry makes the war possible. But torpedoes at sea will dampen the fires. Merely to exist in peacetime, Japan needs 3 million tons of shipping, the third largest merchant fleet in the world. For war, the tonnage must be doubled. To link the home islands with the essential resources of her empire, to maintain her garrisons overseas, to weld together the greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, Japan needs ships, ships, and ships, and more ships. The adrenaline that keeps Japan alive flows in through her ports, across her docks, and onto her wharves. The Japanese have conquered an empire, stretching from Siberia to the Indies. But none of the victories won on the battlefield, won at sea, will profit Japan if the grubby routine of the waterfront is disrupted. No bugles blow and no bands play for the vital maroons, the merchant ships. But sailing south, east, west, and north, they keep the island empire alive. Without her men of war, Japan cannot conquer. Without her merchantmen, she cannot survive. From the Asiatic mainland to Malaya and Indochina, from the Philippines and Borneo, the plunder pours in that feeds the Japanese war machine, feeds Japan. Oil, rice, sugar, salt, the stuff of life itself. Everywhere they sail, singly or in convoy, hugging the shore or far at sea. The freighters, the transports. Destruction of the Japanese merchant fleet becomes a major objective of the Allied war at sea. Top priority targets, the freighters, the transports. Find them, chase them, sink them. Are more grueling, more agonizing, more horrible. It is a time for stout hose and stouter hearts. But spiritually, they belong to the East. Hirohito receives the worship of his 73 million subjects, not as a poet of peace, but as a warrior god, as both priest and emperor. He is sublime majesty. He is son of heaven. He is destined by divine right to seek domination of all the world. And so it comes to pass that in 1945, the American Fifth Fleet steams in battle formation toward Japan to smother the domination that set afire the Far East. After 3.5 years of war, the long arm of Allied sea power reaches out to throttle aggression at its source. Four huge task groups, 1,500 ships, 550,000 sailors, Coast Guardsmen, soldiers, Marines, all under the command of Admiral Spruance. An assault as large as the Normandy invasion is bearing down on the island of Okinawa, 300 miles south of the Japanese home islands, 6,000 miles from continental United States. What the Japanese once thought to be impossible, what the Allies hardly dared hope, is about to become reality. It is Easter morning. Tokyo. The Japanese government meets in emergency session. The government knows that Okinawa is a smoldering beacon of coming defeat. The government knows that it must rally the people in a last desperate effort to stave off collapse. Propaganda gives way to harsh, intolerable truth. The Japanese sun is setting. Schools and hospitals, children and nurses, young and old, crippled and infirm, are harnessed to the war machine. With factories smashed by air raids, with manpower consumed at the fronts, with production falling, with the enemy approaching, every citizen of Japan is ordered to increase production. Stand firm. Drive on. At home, desperation. At the fronts, fanaticism. The army is isolated. The air force broken. The navy sunk. But one group is left to save Japan. The kamikaze. Pilots pledge to crash themselves and their planes into enemy warships. The Japanese raise suicide to the status of a military tactic. Kamikaze pilots believe that by dying for the emperor, they live forever. And some even attend their own funerals before the final takeoff. Some fly in their burial robes. All wear a sacred scarf, symbolizing their sacred mission. The pilots take their final vow. I am determined to destroy with my own body the enemy craft that menace our holy soil. I shall strike without returning. Farewell. We shall meet at the Yoshikuni Shrine. At the Yoshikuni Shrine, where the hero dead of Japan achieved godhood. It is April 6th. From the island of Kyushu, 350 suicide planes take off for Okinawa. To those they leave behind, to the life they leave behind, one final government announcement. Valiantly, the young eagles dash forth to attack along a path from which there is no homecoming. in the fleet spread far and wide around Okinawa. Scores of ships are destined to fall victim of suicide attack before the kamikazes have done their worst. Around the fleet, around the island, radar pickets are ringed. Watchdog destroyers, whose mission it is to detect oncoming Japanese planes, plot their course, speed, and range, and alert the bigger boys. From the destroyer picket line go out the first warnings of a long, racking, nerve-shattering ordeal of the fleet at Okinawa. If it be now, 'tis not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is on. The fleet is ready. But one method, and only one, can stop the kamikaze. Shoot him down before he has the chance to crash himself against a ship. American pilots pit courage and skill against the self-destroying frenzy of the Japanese. One last weapon remains against the kamikazes that break through the combat air patrols. Anti-aircraft fire, as intense, murderous, and impenetrable as the ships can possibly make it. The battle becomes a duel between gunners who want to live and pilots who want to die. The attacks are incessant, the damage staggering. To die is to die, but to live is to fight. And the fleet that came to stay fights and lives and stays. Ships with famous names like Bunker Hill and Enterprise, Idaho and New Mexico, Tennessee and Nevada are damaged. The kamikaze becomes the greatest threat encountered by the United States fleet in World War II. The suffering is terrible, the casualties worse. This was the opportunity the Japanese had been waiting for. The kamikaze pilots would trade a plane for a ship, trade suicide for glory. But the ships carry on. Whenever a ship is hit, others come to the rescue. The risks of death are great, but the determination to save a shipmate is greater. Hundreds of sailors are trapped below. Others, hemmed in by flames, escape over the sides. And while the harsh struggle for Okinawa on land, at sea, in the air, grinds on toward victory, Free men everywhere suffer defeat. 9,000 miles away in the United States, the commander-in-chief has fallen. A casualty of war, as surely as if a kamikaze had felled him at the helm. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, defender of democracy, foe of tyranny, architect of victory, is dead. He loved the fleet, its men, its ships, the sea, but as President of the United States, the Navy could but share his allegiance. His life was full, and the elements so mixed in him, that nature might stand up and say to all the world, this was a man. And at Okinawa, 1 out of every 7 naval casualties in World War II result from the fight for Okinawa. Of the 1,500 ships engaged in the campaign, 30 were sunk, 223 damaged, 8 carriers hit, but all survived. More than 3,500 kamikaze planes were destroyed. The greatest suicide offensive in history waxed and waned and collapsed. If the sailors at Okinawa bled, so did the soldiers and Marines ashore. If the Japanese were determined to commit suicide, the Americans were determined to live. If this last battle of World War II was one of the greatest, so was the victory.